Pa was just a colourful character who loved surfing. Marge was a stalwart, and she was a wonderful woman of the old style.
I think in pure essence you can't have a story of surfing on the Sunshine Coast, maybe Queensland, Gold and Sunshine Coast, without a mention of Ma and Pa Bendall.
I think they should be remembered, just giving the surfing a great image.
I think in terms of surfing lore, they are a defining moment in the history of Sunshine Coast surfing. There's no question about that at all.
Ma and Pa were very funny people together. They were very lively people. She was always laughing, so was he.
Howdy folks, Marjorie and Ben Bendall were a couple who left a strong impression. It was partly their energy, their sense of humour, and as you'll see, both of them really liked to shock. Ma and Pa, as they became known here on the Sunshine Coast, were well suited. Married in the 1950s, it was the second time for both of them. Some thought they were a little eccentric, but they were both restless and they enjoyed a physically active life well into their 60s. Many will remember the Bendalls for their warmth and their sense of fun. But as we'll see in this film, Ma and Pa Bendall will be remembered for much more than that. They gave enormous support to young people, and they helped boost the image of surfing in Australia for more than 20 years.
Ben was, he was in the Canadian Air Force during the war. I don't know if he saw action, I think he did. But he was, he loved the Air Force. There's a great photo of him on the cover of, I think it was Life magazine, I think it was, or the American magazine's a beautiful cover photo of him in his leather helmet and goggles. Ma was a very adventurous girl. And she came from quite a big cattle property out western Queensland. And when she was mid-20s, she decided to go overseas.
And she went to England and Europe, and she was teaching some young boys in Germany when war broke out. No, things got a bit hot. It was in the 30s, that's right. She went to the Berlin Olympics in 36.
She met Ben in 49, I think it was. He was out touring Australia, and they both became, they were both mad, physical people. They were swimmers, body surfers, loved tennis. They had a roller skating ring in their property. They loved skating.
When Marge married Ben, she already owned holiday flats at Bullcock Beach in Caloundra, and it was Harmony Lodge that gave Marge and Ben the freedom to go off on their sporting adventures. Ben was the crazy one, with Marge not very far behind.
She bought a camera and they just took surfing movies like mad. But the funny thing was that Ma was taking most of the movies, and she'd be filming Ben, say, at National Park, and suddenly a parrot would fly over, and the camera would go up to the parrot, and there'd be a parrot flying around, then to go back to Ben surfing, and then a big, nice flower, she'd see it go, the flower over there. It was quite funny, though.
Right across the road from Harmony Lodge is the one outdoor attraction that really captured the interest of Marge and Ben Bendall. It was, of course, the surfing beach. In the late 1950s, hardly anyone was surfing in Australia, and it wasn't really a recognised sport. But Ben and Marge were instantly hooked when they saw a couple of young boys surfing at Kings Beach.
I first met Ben when he come around here and saw us catching waves off here. That's when I first saw them, but Joe knew them before that. Joe and I used to come around here, sit up on Pa's park there now, and we used to look at the surf here, and we say, you know, we can surf this is good.
Ben said, that's for me, and so he got a big stick of balsa and made a big old heavy board out of it and went surfing, and Ma saw what she saw about Ben surfing she loved, so she got one too, and that's how they started.
He used to just get on the board, and when he said when he'd blow his whistle, he had a whistle he used to hang around his neck. And he'd blow this whistle to let everyone know he's coming across the way, because I don't think he could turn it any other way, you know, so he'd let you know he's coming, so get out of the road. You couldn't do anything else.
Half the time he's out of control in the early days.
One of the local guys, Joey Irwin, introduced me to Pa, and he had I thought he was a Yank because he had an accent, but he had a university varsity jacket on with leather patches on the elbows and red with the big letters on it. And, oh, this guy's got the American gear, you know, he's cool. And what shocked me was his surfboard. He pulled it out of the back of his ute and put it on the ground, and I asked what it was, and he said, yeah, I made it out of polystyrene, out of that Kool-Aid. And I said, what? And epoxy resin, oh, I hate that stuff. And I said, oh, can I pick it up, Ben? And he said, yeah, sure. So I reached over to pick the thing up and went, whoa! Because it only weighed about 12 pounds. And our boards all weighed 35 pounds. We surfed around them and past them and over them, but finally Pa caught a wave, and he was very wobbly, and as soon as he got to his feet, it was woo, 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 yelling out top of his voice. He was surfing.
He used to hoot and holler, and being a Canadian, you know, they hoot and holler a lot. And we used to shake our head and keep out of his way, let him go, you know, because there's only about half a dozen tops out there, you know, so everyone had their own wave. If he was going for a wave, you just let him go, let him do his bit and we catch the next one, you know.
Well, I first met Ben and Ma on Kings Beach. I was writing for the Courier Mail and in sport, and I saw him come out of the surf with his surfboard, and he was fit as a fiddle, but he looked much older than me, and I think he's about 20 or 30 years older than me. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I introduced myself to him with the intention of learning getting to teach me to surf. But then he was so interesting, such an interesting character, and when I met Ma too, she was such an interesting character. I thought they'd make a great story, and I actually wrote a feature about them. But then after that, of course, I was surfing with them quite a bit.
I would have been 9-year-old in 1961 when I first met Pa. It was at Kings Beach. Pa was very, very open and friendly, you know, incredibly understanding to what his love of surfing was and how he fostered it and engendered it. And Ma, I think, took up surfing because that was her reason to hang out with him. And they were a lovely sort of couple that engendered themselves to all the young people.
I paddled out at Kings Beach where I shouldn't have been. No way, no. I was too small and had no idea. And Mars, there was a group of surfers out there, and an older woman has surprised me. Has paddled out of the pack and paddled over to me and said, maybe over here it'd be better, and directed me away from a gang of more than competent surfers who would have been quite irritated to have had me in their midst. And she showed me how to turn the thing around and point it back towards shore, because I was struggling with that at the time. I've got to talk to you about Saturday too at some stage as soon as that stuff comes through. I got into journalism slowly. I went to the Courier Mail for a period of time, but it wasn't me. I wanted to be at the beach. A job came up back up here with the daily launch, and I couldn't get up here quick enough. I'd met my wife by that stage, and I knew where I wanted to spend my life, and I knew where I wanted to raise my kids, and it was as close to the beach as possible.
Our generation was the free, liberated generation in the sense that the world looked rosy, except for the Cold War going on in the background. The future in the 50s and 60s was, you know, the suburban dream. Everyone gets a car, everyone gets a washing machine, and you get annual holidays at the beach, and life looked rosy for that generation. And I think surfing was a natural offshoot of that.
Often we would run into the nomadic Bob McTavish. He seemed to move constantly up and down the coast. He'd stop off at Angari to share a surf story around the fire and ride a few quality waves.
Unintentionally, I became a surfboard shaper and designer, because you can't turn your brain off, and therefore I was born with an inventive streak, and it manifested as a surfboard shaper and designer. So by the end of the 60s, I had a career, for want of a better word, as a surfboard maker, which I'm still doing. I've been making surfboards for 45 years.
Funnily enough, young people were attracted to this odd couple who seemed to have permanent open house at Harmony Lodge. There was no generation gap with Marge and Ben Bendall, even though the youngsters gave them those affectionate nicknames of Ma and Pa.
There's movies around those days, and there was two older people in them that were called Ma and Pa Kettle, and she resembled Ma Kettle in a lot of ways, and they were a very odd couple, and so were Ma and Pa. In those days they were certainly odd, to compare what was around. And also being Margery Bendall, the female actress was Marjorie Main. Was Marjorie Main, so even more so. It was Marge.
Marge was a stalwart, and she was a wonderful woman of the old style.
Ma was, although she was a surfer, she was more matronly, I think. Much calmer than Pa. She was the tea maker, but she'd be out in the surf and she'd start introducing you to other surfers out there. And we often expected to pull out a tea set or something on the board and say, Ian, this is Jeff.
Well, Ma was a good cook. We'd have the first meal, which was soup, then the plates were shot off, then we'd have the main, plates were shot off, and then we had the sweets. And we had the morning tea, the afternoon tea. You put on weight when you went up there.
Such, eccentric, nice people. I mean, when my car would be full of water, it used to leak like a sieve in the rain, and I slept on their veranda under old tarps and things, and they wouldn't hesitate in saying, oh, Ian, come up and sleep on the veranda if it's no good. And I think everyone just really appreciated that they took an interest in us.
Ma was shooting that 8mm footage, and so they started to have movie nights at their place, and they'd show this endless bad footage and turn on tea and bickies or a couple of beers or a glass of wine or whatever, and that became a once a month thing at Harmony Lodge. I think Marge would have liked Ben to be a little better around the flats, a bit more onto the painting and the repairs and running the business side of things. I think he left a lot of that to her. I think she wanted him to do more, and he was always running off surfing. So I detected that little bit of angst there.
Oh yeah, Ma had to get those flats clean. If she was running late, Pa would go off surfing, then Ma had to follow.
They had a famous van with their boards on the rack outside the van, and they had everything in there for camping, whatever, travelling around Australia. But it used to be parked down at Moffett Beach, and we were all just young, raggedy-ass surfers, and we'd come down there and we'd go for a surf and come in, and they'd be back in the van, and it was all warm, and they having cups of tea, and you could smell toast, and we'd be looking in, and they'd say, oh, you want a cup of tea? And they always invited everyone in, and slowly you got to know them.
And she always played a fairly low profile, but was always there, handing him his, cup of tea or Wheaties, or depending on what time of day it was, because they were always fairly self-contained when they were at the beach in their van.
Ben was very keen on travelling anywhere to surf, and they travelled in Australia quite a bit in the old van, and Ma would go along with anything he wanted because he was always adventurous, and she was an adventurous person.
I'd see them on the side of the road when I was off on swimming carnivals from casino, and they'd be parked in their old van having a cup of tea, and they just struck me as the essence of the good life compared to the life perhaps that my own family lived, which was very small.
First trip to Noosa was fantastic, but this time he was in the Fairlane, in the ranch wagon, and he said, "Come on, we're going somewhere else today." I said, "Yeah, great." He said, "Chuck your body." I said, "You're going to Noosa?" And I said, "What's that?" I'd heard of Noosa in the sense that you'd heard of Yandina or Karoi. They were just villages somewhere up there. We rolled down the hill at Noosa, and there was still a farm down the bottom of the hill. There were still cows grazing on the corners, and there was this magnificent headland and these beautiful peeling waves up in the point. I went out on my 8'3" balsa, and Ma and Pa went out on their foam boards. But Ma and Pa couldn't catch a wave, even though it was first point about this big, but because it was screwing along, churning on sand, they had no idea. They'd paddle into it, get to their feet and go over the falls. This one stage I caught a wave into Johnson's, and Pa was still out at National, and I was paddling back out and looking at the magnificent headland, and there was not a soul around. I go, "Boy, it's great, but it's just a little bit lonely. I wish there were some more people here." Never again have I thought that.
Of course, by the middle of the 1960s, surfing was caught up in that rebellious spirit of the times. In fact, many young people let surfing express the obvious. I don't have to do what my parents do.
Life seemed pointless to me, that you'd go from school to work to a marriage to mortgage and then retirement, and your best years are when you got free time when you're 60 or 65. That just seems stupid to me. So I wanted to turn it upside down and have my retirement when I was young.
No need to translate.
Surfers had an image of being sort of antisocial and wild and crazy, and there was a whole drug aspect to it, and then they were fighting the rockers. It was sort of like beach warfare. So, the last thing any parent ever wanted was to have a kid as a surfer.
It did pick up an image because we were board-shorted and barefooted and more or less unkempt, because no one really bothered about how long or untidy your hair was, as long as it wasn't in your eyes when you were on a wave.
No need to translate how it's moved.
Marijuana came into our culture fairly early, 64, 65. We started to see a bit of dope around, and that followed by LSD in 67, and because of the promises that Timothy Leary and others were making about instant nirvana by taking acid, and so naturally, as a spiritual quest, we tried those things, and we were trying to see if there was a key to an answer to the craziness in the world.
Being a message she has kept from me, waited for the right time to release.
Well, Ma wasn't happy with me at all, and I didn't know about it really until the 70s, but she accused me of promoting drugs and generally wrecking contributed to the wreckage of the culture, which I couldn't deny I was guilty.
Bob was a wild sort of had an image and a reputation with his stowing away and out there on the edge of surfing, but he was a great creative surfer. You know, his ideas, what he brought into surfing through board design and so on.
I apologised to her and said I've totally changed, and so yeah, she accepted my apology and we became friends again in the 70s.
I think they like to keep things in control, and as you get older you tend to try to influence younger people, so that's where Ma would have passed it on to Bob.
Ma and Pa Bendall were worried that surfing was getting a negative image, so Pa decided to create a new surfing association. The Moffeteers had one special rule: to become a member, you had to promise to be well behaved.
Becoming a Moffeteer was like a badge of honour, and it was Pa's way of setting up some structure amongst the surfers, the then surfers of Caloundra, and I think it was probably the first what you'd call congregation of surfers. It probably predated even the Australian Surf Riders or any of the Sydney Surf Riders clubs.
Moffeteers, for instance, was Ben's sole idea, it was his idea, and it was to help kids, to help promote the sport for a start, but it was to help kids too, to get them off the street and to get them. There's a lot of kids up here don't play sport, or they didn't in those days. But so Ben got them together and he said you can see them, some of them are going a bit wild on the surf, so I think it was his idea, I think, to get a bit of control over them, that he started the Moffeteers, and he succeeded on it.
He didn't tolerate bad language, bad behaviour. He did not tolerate any type of vandalism or any type of drugs.
That was one thing about the Moffeteers, that he actually spelled out that the kids had to be good kids in their community to retain their position in the club. So that was the first sign or notice that the Caloundra kids had they got something extra out of the surfing club, was to be well behaved and keep out of trouble.
I remember seeing in the paper when someone interviewed him and he said, well, you know, people who are hoons that are tearing around in cars and causing trouble, they won't be in the Moffeteers. And I used to think, oh, probably half my mates are tearing around in cars, but we all used to sort of toe the line with Ben.
There was two tiers of Moffeteers. One was a 6+, which meant that you were, I think the term was competent or well able to manage a 6-foot wave, and there was a 12+, which meant that you could manage a 12-foot plus wave. So there was a literal hierarchy within the Moffeteers. And so that if you were a 6+, you strove to get some big swell and pick up your next badge, so to speak.
He always gave you a 6+ sticker first to put on your board, but he was the sole judge. He had to witness you surfing a 6-foot wave. Now, for the life of me, I can't remember when I surfed a 12-foot wave, but there was some big stuff at Moffett over the years, and we're all out there. And some pretty scary days. So, you know, I can only say that Ben was the judge, and that a lot of us had the 12+ stickers.
It's dated 1967. It's my first Hayden Kenny surfboard. It's got the Moffeteer 6+ symbol on the bottom. I was striving for 12 plus. Just turned 15, I think, in this photo. That was standard fare for a surfer. Board shorts, towel, barefoot, board.
The Moffeteers met for only a few years, but in that time a lot of youngsters went along with Pa's rules. And for the first time they discovered the joys of surfing competitions, led of course by Pa.
The day came for the nose riding contest, and the had a table set up at Kings Beach with all the trophies on it, and most of them were egg cup size trophies. But there was one magnificent, beautiful one, a big one, and because all the young Moffeteers are all in their teens, we're all looking at the same, boy, who's going to win that? Who's going to win that? That's a fantastic trophy. And Ben had decided who these trophies were going to for a start. Anyway, the Ampol PR man was up to present the trophies, and presenting these egg cup sized trophies to the kids, and finally there's the one left, the really big, the beautiful big trophy, the champion of champions. And they said, who's going to get this? Who's going to get this? And up got the Ampol man and said, and the winner of the major trophy today is Mr. Ben Bendall. And Ben said, oh no, God, I don't believe I should win this. I don't deserve this. And he was the bloke who gave the trophy. He decided who would get that.
Pa did well that day, won a trophy and qualified for the Australian surf titles. He was awarded an additional prize for being the world's oldest competitor.
I was surprised, but, well, not altogether surprised how he put his age on, because it sounded more remarkable, called himself. He was born on the 17th of January 1909 because I saw his passport and birth certificate, so I can swear to that. And he made out he was 4 or 5 years older.
Why did he do that?
Well, it sounded more remarkable. I mean, if you're surfing and you're 65, it's better than if you're 35, isn't it? Yeah.
Manly Beach in Sydney was to hold the first World Surfing Championship.
And for that reason, it attracted more attention than it would nowadays. It attracted worldwide attention and also Australian-wide attention, so much so that we had about 63,000 people watching the events.
I started at 23, and when I won the world title, I was just about a month off 27. And I competed for about 11 years. But I still kept surfing. The American girl, Linda Benson, she used to do the surfing for the Gidget movies, and she was the favourite, but I pipped her by the post by about 1.5 points. But it doesn't matter, if you win it, you win it.
I turned 62 right there on the beach one day, and Phyllis O'Donnell, a former world's champion, gave me a good luck basket.
Oh, I think Pa had a bit of a gift of the gab. Pa liked to, he liked the limelight. Definitely liked the limelight. But they were a great pair together. They complemented each other.
They handed out the trophies to Australia's bravest and fairest. To Ma and Pa, rewards for the oldest and boldest.
We're there for the love of surfing, and we didn't care whether, there were older people with us or not. Everyone was welcome, and there weren't that many older surfers in those days. We're all old now. But essentially it's for old surfers, very old surfers. Anyone over 50 can come in, and there's divisions over 55, over 60s. We're probably going to go further as everyone gets older. But it's a great contest because it's a it's just a friendly, and as the organisers say, there's no sheep stations up for grabs. There's a few trophies, but it's more about fun and still being out there over 50.
Hawaii just kept calling him. I think he wanted to go there and surf there because he'd been to Hawaii in his job as in the Canadian Air Force. And he could see the movies then. I think when he saw some of the movies of these giant waves, he wanted to go and ride them because he was a big wave rider. And Ma would go along with anything he wanted because he was always adventurous. And she was an adventurous person.
I was wiped out on the big wave at Sunset Beach, Hawaii. Ended up with double vision, see everything double, except money.
Yeah, he had a bang in the head with the board, and we thought it was quite amusing because it gave him double vision, see? So when he used to try and catch a wave, he didn't know which wave to catch, and he used to catch the wrong bloody wave. And so we put this patch on then, so you only see one wave instead of two.
Of course, he looked, like a buccaneer or a pirate, I guess, and that was a part of the myth then. But it was, it wasn't due to it. Well, I mean, people rationalise, and he probably believed that he had a bump on his head and that caused it, but it wasn't. No. First manifested when he had double vision, which we called diplopia. So he had that investigated at the time, and I don't think they could really find the reason, but obviously later on it became obvious that it was the first manifestation of the motor neuron disease, which gradually progressed until he became so weak and he was falling over and had to give up board riding.
I think he liked to paint himself as eccentric later, like when he lost his eye and he started to wear a patch, and when he he started to believe his own press and become a character.
First time I knew Ben was a bit crook was in Brisbane. I saw him for the first time in a shirt and tie and coat. He was walking down Queen Street with Ma, and I'd never seen him in anything else but a t-shirt or open neck shirt and shorts. And I stopped him to say hello and talk what had happened, and he'd just been to see a specialist about something he had wrong with him. And I didn't ask him much more about it. Anyway, next thing I know, he was getting worse and worse, and they flew to Japan for treatment.
Pa, just before he sort of got immobilised, he couldn't walk and that, he used to sort of half crawl down the beach with his board and go surfing and crawl and drag the board back. That was towards the end, and I wasn't here. I just heard second hand from one of the local blokes here that used to see him, and he reckons it's quite sad to see him finish off surfing that way.
And he was bent on the beach. There was no one out surfing, but he'd been out, and he was lying on the beach, dragging his board out of the water. He'd gone out trying to surf with this disease, with this sickness he had. And I went down and tried to help him carry the board. He said, no, I'm right, he wouldn't let me. So he dragged it up, and I put it on this car for him. But he had been out, that's how determined he was. He was so sick, he could hardly stand up, but he dragged his board into the surf, paddled out, and tried to get a wave. He didn't get one, he told me. But he tried to, and that was the last one he went in the surf, and that was just an incredible thing to see a sick man like that.
Sadly, Pa died from his illness in 1973. But straight away, old friends and surfing buddies got together to make sure that Pa's contribution to surfing would never be forgotten.
A guy came to me, a mate of mine from Caloundra, a guy by the name of Russell Roberts, and he said, look, Pa's funeral just recently, and we were thinking, a few of the mates, that we should do something to remember Pa by, and he approached me because I was in an administrative position in regional surfing and state level. He said, what can we do? And I said, well, what about a contest, And we said, okay, we'll start a memorial contest for Pa in 1974, that was. what we need for all the good young surfers on the coast is to see some really legend-type surfers. So we actually invited, the contest format was we had 15 invitees, and then we had a big surf out to get the next 15 surfers to meet the invitees. So we invited each state champion, the Australian champion, and we invited overseas guys. So the kids were stoked to see. We had Simon Anderson, Cole Smith from Narrabeen, Ian Cairns across from Western Australia.
Cairns, who remembers this wave only too well, was determined to make a career out of professional surfing. Originally from Perth, he spent most of his time travelling. It was Cairns, his close friend Peter Townend, and another talented surfer, Mark Warren, who formed a promotional team that would go in search of fame. They called themselves the Bronzed Aussies.
But in terms of a really viable professional opportunity for young kids, surfing is really can be taken very seriously. I mean, when guys are earning over $1 million a year in sponsorship contracts to be a surfer, then you know that it's sort of made the grade.
Well, from that, you could see our young kids, when I say young, 19 years old, and that Steve Reed, Ian Dimon, Robert Wolfe, and now you look at the status of Joel Parkinson. He's a young kid, his dad's been in the contest and he's grown up with this contest in his own backyard and he's wanted to win it and he's now gone on to world level. So
you take the Mick Fanning and Joel Parkinson, Kelly Slater, Taj Burrow. I mean, those guys have a dream lifestyle. I mean, they travel all around the world to all of these amazing surf contests. I mean, currently they're in Chile, they've been in Tahiti, they're going to go to South Africa. It's sort of like endless summer permanently, you know.
I was 13 and I first surfed the Pa. I can't remember if I actually went in the open men's, but I know I surfed in the juniors and I got fourth in the under 18s. I think it was under 18 or under 19 then. And I remember the waves were definitely good for me. It was small, you know. I was so small then, and it was at Moffett Beach, and it was a pretty good feeling. I mean, I remember, because I didn't expect to even get fourth or even make it to a heat.
Ma passed away in 2001 at the age of 91 and still supporting what had become the Pa and Ma Bendall Memorial Surfing Competition on the Sunshine Coast. In fact, you know, until the year she died, Ma made sure that she turned up for every Bendall surfing event. It continues to remind us just how much Ma and Pa Bendall have enriched the sport of Australian surfing.
I love the way she always came down to the beach, you know, at every event she'd come down, smile on her face. You know, I was lucky enough to have a few good chats with her and stuff like that. And, you know, there was one time I won that I donated the money so she could go on a holiday, and she cried and stuff, and it almost made me pretty teary about that.
Well, they were just different. They were different sort of people, and they've got a park up there named after them, and you know, that's not many people get parks named after them, so they must have done a fair bit of good to the young people around, got them out surfing and all that.
Ma and Pa rightly should be remembered. Because they did a lot for the youth of Caloundra, a lot for the youth of Australia, I suppose.
They engendered in me at an early age probably at a time when I really needed it, a measure of cooperation.
Well, I think one great thing they did was to elevate the so-called surfy culture, you know.
They pointed Pa's objective to clean up the sport was basically is what's happened. He saw that it could have more mainstream appeal if it was seen as less rebellious. And look at it now. You've got grandparents surfing with their grandchildren, and the mothers and fathers all surfing in surfing events, or just travelling the world surfing together. That was unheard of in my day.
He's a real gem, and Caloundra shouldn't forget him, because he was there at the birth of the surf culture. He was there for the very seeds of it. He's one of the roots of the surf culture on the East Coast.
I think in every sport there's founding fathers. I think in pure essence you can't have a story of surfing on the Sunshine Coast, maybe Queensland, Gold End Sunshine Coast, without a mention of Ma and Pa Bendall.